Thank you very much, Marian. And thank you everyone for being here in this session. Last week we had a fantastic course with a whole group of people from Brunei. It was also really fun and very useful, I think, for many people to be able to share their own experiences and also, to learn a little bit from what I had to share with everyone. I've done this work for about, 20 years by now. And I have, really changed a lot of environments in terms of business continuity management. You might recognize with business continuity that a lot of people focus on big documents, piles of documentation, and not so much on actually the maintenance of all of that and being ready when a real incident happens. And I find that in the environments that I've worked, many people on the day of a real incident still didn't know what page to go to in that big plan and if it was up to date and what their bits were, what their role was. So really made a habit of reducing volume and increasing practicality of it. So I hope I can share some thoughts with you on that and that you'll enjoy what I've got to share and that you can actually benefit from those thoughts. I've done this work all over the world, literally. I know Marian and the rest of the team have done it for quite a long time now. It must be around 10 years. I was thinking we should have a celebration when we can all get back together. And yeah, it's been fascinating to see that the same issues, what I just highlighted about big plans and not being actually ready for an incident, those symptoms seem to be happening all over the world. And I've literally done this work in 5 continents and still am doing that virtually at the moment. But it's quite amazing how in all those places the same kind of issues seem to bubble up. So without further ado, this was a little intro, but we'll go through some of the slides and hopefully we'll initiate in you some thoughts on what the scope of this course will be. Of course, we've all learned a lot from COVID-19, but there's a lot of other incidents that could happen. And I certainly don't want to make people feel that that COVID-19 is the only thing there. Especially in Asia, all across, Malaysia, but also the rest of Southeast Asia, flooding, for example, has happened. But also more sort of isolated events like building fires, structural damage to buildings, and other incident related to staff health and well-being and security and safety and so on. So we'll talk about a lot more incidents. And of course, the recent trend of, and especially since COVID-19, I see a lot of organizations actually affected by this particular thing is cyber attacks. And the vulnerabilities that we all seem to, not all of us seem to have that vulnerability in the business, but people working from home actually has initiated a lot more vulnerability in that cyber security kind of context as well, and the less controlled situation that we now have. So yeah, all of those incidents could theoretically happen, and business continuity touches on all of that. So let me flick through the slides here. A little bit more on my background you can see, and I'll remove the floating element there. But what you see is this a little bit about my background since about 20 years that I've been doing this particular consultancy work. You can see quite a few ISO standards that are in that list there. So the ISO 22301, that's the one related to business continuity management, but also the ISO 31000, which is related to risk management as a sort of a broader process. And you can see in there also the ISO 27001, which is information security related. So all of those frameworks, standards, I've been heavily involved in and also use quite a lot. I wouldn't say a standard is needed for every single environment, but it certainly helps speak the same language. And it also helps you not to forget any particular critical elements of a business continuity process in this regard. So I see sometimes people misuse standards a little bit. They think, oh, the standard will just fix everything because people will have to follow it, and then we have a kind of a stick approach. And I certainly don't think that's the right way to use them. So it's more to have a framework behind us that we know we're not going to forget anything. Now you can see a few other things in there, the ISACA, the Risk Management Institute of Australasia, the RMIA, COBIT, ITIL, and a number of certifications that I've also got in the realm of the Disaster Recovery Institute and the Business Continuity Institute. They are institutes that are quite helpful if people want to connect with others in the industry, and the same with ISACA and RMIA. So it depends a little bit on what angle you're coming from. If you're coming from an angle of information security or IT disaster recovery, or more from an angle of the business side of things or risk management side of things. So all of those networks and associations are kind of touching on different aspects. You can see in there also quite a few aspects that I've been in touch with in terms of central banks, for example, and other government entities. Quite a few of you are also from larger corporates that I just studied the list of participants again for this course, and it's a nice mix. So yeah, and you can see a few other things that I've done in Southeast Asia, South America, and also Southeast Asia actually, for the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and also helping smaller businesses, not just the larger corporates, and a few of the awards there. And you can see a picture of the Netherlands. And the Netherlands is my home country originally. I actually managed to travel here during COVID. It's quite amazing. I'm traveling back to Australia on Friday, but I'm actually currently in the Netherlands, and I was working for some essential services here. So the Netherlands is actually the masters of disaster planning. We are almost 80%, 75% underwater level. So we've been mastering the art of keeping safe and risk management when it comes to that, and the threat of flooding, etc. So maybe it was in my genes, but somehow I ended up in this field of disaster recovery and business continuity. So that was a little bit about myself. You can see here some of the locations I've been visiting, and if you are new to business continuity and you haven't done this work before, and you're quite new to the whole feeling of it, and maybe uncertain about what you're doing in that role because someone has told you, go and build the BCP or make the BCP better, and you have hardly even heard about what BCP is. That's very understandable. There's quite a lot of people who enter business continuity in that way. And in fact, there's almost nobody who comes out of university with the full skill set for business continuity planning. So we find people coming from all different angles, and sometimes doing it part-time as part of their other roles that they have in an organization. I started in that same way about 14 years ago. I started in an actual BCP role in an organization full-time, but I was also wearing the hat of IT disaster recovery and a few other things. So it's usually that kind of role. Now, if you are new to the field, don't be too desperate or don't worry too much, because it's actually a fantastic area to work in, and also very big opportunities for one day again when we can all travel. I'm sure that you'll find opportunities to travel for this work, because if you're good at it and if you've got a real passion for it, all over the world people will need your skill set. Yeah, and if you're like I said, if you're really passionate about it, you'll be a real differentiating factor in there. So I would say, please get fully engaged in this course, in this topic, because there's heaps of opportunities to work overseas as well, or for different organizations, different sectors, different industries, and even within Southeast Asia and different locations as well, because it's certainly not something that is easy to find people for. In fact, I'm always looking for good consultants, and it's sometimes not easy to find the right skills. So welcome to business continuity planning if this is your first step in this field. Now, I'd love to hear from you guys, and when you speak, if you can all please share about, let's say, a couple of minutes about your background, and also these 3 key questions. So if you have experience with real disasters or near misses, as we would call them, so things that almost went wrong, And that could be in work, in your current work or in previous roles, or it could be in different places where you lived or at the home front. So please share that and your experience with BCM, if you have any, and expectations from this workshop. And of course, your name and the organization you work for. Now, that would be absolutely fantastic. I'm going to tweak a little bit here with the list that I have of all of you and where you work. I will also bring up the participant list and the camera field. I'm just going to ask you for 1 second so I can get that all happening. And I will, ideally, if I can give someone the word to speak. Amina, would you be able to get started, just to share about these 3 questions and also the organization that you work for? And I'm just going to unmute you for this moment.
Yeah, sure. Good morning. I'm Amina from Agrobank. Currently, I'm the Business Continuity Management Section Head. I have experience in BCM for about 2 to 3 years already. My real experience actually this year, real disaster that we face is on the COVID this year. So we have been putting in all the learn experience and whatever lessons that we had for the past few years into the managing of the COVID situation in the organization. That's what we have been doing so far. I would expect this workshop could give me some insight on what are the things that we can do in order to bring back the business as usual.
Yeah, very good point.
Yeah.
And you're not the only one, I'm sure, that struggles with that concept, because it's so in limbo and it's changing constantly. So when you say, hey, we'll do this next week and we'll go back to normal, suddenly something else changes. So
yeah.
I'm sure we can all share a lot of thoughts on that and some best practices from each organization too. So thank you, Amina. Thank you so much, and nice to meet you. I wanted to say, you guys are most welcome to keep your cameras on the whole time if you're comfortable. I find it personally a lot nicer, but it's up to you, you know, what you would like to do. But I love seeing you guys. Okay, so when you can, please feel free to do that. Thanks.
All right.
Now, Christopher, would you be able to share with us next? I'm just going alphabetically. That's the fairest way, I think. So I'm just going to give you the word if you can do the same thing for us.
Hi everyone. I'm from the Penang Water Supply Corporation in Penang, Malaysia. I'm currently managing the company's enterprise business management. So I don't really have much experience with business continuity management. It's really new field for me. In short, I just want to learn what is it all about.
Your sound is not super clear. Maybe you can speak up a little bit.
All right. Okay. How about now?
I
have to move the mic closer to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
What were you saying last, Christopher?
Sorry.
I saw you smiling. I wanted to know what it was.
All right. Yeah. So BCM is a really new area for me. So just to keep it short, I just want to know what is it all about and how to do it.
Yeah. Great. And how did you guys go with COVID? Was that a really big challenge for where you work?
It is a big challenge because we are in the utilities industry, which is essential service. So the challenge is how do we continue with business as usual, at the same time making sure that we keep our employees safe.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is regulatory driven, coming from the government and state government. So we have to adhere to the strict whichever is more strict. We have to whichever is more stringent, we have to follow the more stringent regulations. So that's a bit of cutting around time.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing, Christopher, and nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Iswani, would you be able to take the next, to pick up the stick next.
Hi. Morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
That's clear.
All right. So I'm Ezwani from Telekom Malaysia Berhad. So I'm an accountant. So specifically in my experience in the business continuity is, I can see the result of it in the accounts, right? But then experience in doing it itself is not so much. In Telekom Malaysia, we have a very good risk management framework. So I'm not sure how is that far from business continuity management. I would like to see that. And the disaster near miss, COVID-19 is a tough hit for us. Though being everybody needs to be online at that time, and to ensure that the business requirement, our customers' business requirement are met. At the same time, we have gamers, we have YouTubers, and everything stealing the bandwidth that we have, So we have to manage that between the customers doing real business and those users, consumers needing the bandwidth to make sure they are happy at home. So one of the challenges that we had for Telekom Malaysia is we are not fully digitalized. And in our organization, there are chief of strategy and chief of digital, but I think the best thing that gets us to be digital is COVID, actually. So it pushes all to be digital during that time. So, so I would like to see this business continuity management, how is it different from risk management, and how can it help my passion, right? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Ezwani. Yeah, absolutely. Risk management is a core component of the whole business continuity framework, but also the other way around. There's a bit of a handshake situation with risk and BCM, so we'll definitely cover that. And I was thinking, you mentioned gamers. I was thinking about Netflix. Netflix is apparently had to change its resolution or something so that it wasn't going to suck up the whole of the internet, basically. So. Very challenging for telecommunications companies. So thank you very much for sharing and nice to meet you.
Yes.
Hari Kumar, would you be able to share next as well?
Hi, y'all can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good morning everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Hari Kumar. I'm from Tokyo Marine Insurance Malaysia. So our core business is actually general insurance, and I'm actually the PIC for the BCM in my company. Previously, I was actually an internal auditor in a different company, which was in an investment company. So I was 3 years as an internal auditor. I was experiencing BCM from actually an IA's perspective, actually doing the reviewing and doing independent checking on the BCM report and the practices. But currently, I'm actually the PIC, so it's more about executing the programs or BCM programs in my company. So throughout my entire career, COVID-19 is my real first disaster, actual disaster. The lesson learned from COVID-19 or the actually experience from this will be resources. We had the perfect plan, everything was in place, but during the execution of the real event, everything went haywire because the resources was not sufficient as what the actually planned. During our planning, the head of our business unit says maybe 2 staff is sufficient enough to actually do the actual process during BCP time. But comes to COVID-19 pandemic, especially where Malaysian government introduced MCO, which actually the first time in a nationwide. So business units really doesn't have what to expect. So the resources planned and the actual resource required doesn't match become mismatched, and we have to redo the entire planning. So that's the point that we were actually struggling the first few days before we actually managed to send back all the staff who work from home. Yeah. So my expectation from this workshop would be that how can I improve the BCM plans and practices in my company with current resources available, because cost is always a problem for most companies, and especially for insurance sector, where we try to control the costs very tightly and try to increase our profit margin. We try to put more reserve in our claims, and I will try to improve our underwriting. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Harry, for sharing. Yeah, very recognizable as well. And you mentioned MCO. You mean the minimum continuity objective?
Yeah.
Yeah.
MCO was actually the government's more like a lockdown thing, but in our country, Malaysia, we call it MCO because we do not do a lockdown. We control the movement restriction of the people. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you for explaining all that. Fantastic. So, Mohammed Hassan, would you be able to take next the stage?
Hi, Ms. K, and hi, everyone.
Hi.
Okay. Okay, my name is Hasnul, and I am from KWAP, Kumpulan Wang Persaraan Malaysia. It is a pension fund. I'm currently responsible for operational risk and business continuity management of KWAP. I've not experienced any crisis before except for COVID this year. So my main experience, or my real experience in terms of crisis is early this year. So in terms of experience, it was quite overwhelming in the beginning. I can't say that we were completely prepared. So there were a lot of things that we had to re-strategize, redesign in terms of our reaction towards the crisis. And at the same time, while we were planning for COVID, we had a potential crisis as well because there was a political realignment in Malaysia. So we had to come up with a few strategies for that too. So we were having like multiple CMT meetings in a day before the MCO, as what Hari mentioned earlier. And then during MCO, it was quite a game changer as well. At least I've not experienced quarantine in Malaysia in my lifetime. But it was a steep learning curve for us to actually learn how to work remotely. And thank God it turned out well for us. So in terms of my expectation for this program, I would like to learn more in terms of how do we better prepare ourselves for the unexpected. Crisis can happen in many forms, and most of the time it is unexpected. So preparation in terms of budget and also practice in terms of effectiveness, efficiency, and also governance to be important, need to be specific. That is all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Hasnul. Great, thanks for sharing. And we'll talk about all those aspects you mentioned earlier, also budget and how to structure and how to really get more prepared for the unexpected and knowing not knowing what would be the unexpected events, because then they wouldn't be unexpected, but getting that mindset of thinking what could be around the corner, what don't we know yet, etc. Yeah, thank you. Okay, Firdaus, would you like to take the next option?
Hello, good morning everyone. My name is Firdaus. I'm from Petronas Dagangan Berhad. So basically I'm my designation is crisis management and business continuity management. So it's a big confusion between the crisis management and the business continuity management. So if you talk about the definition, crisis is something that impacts to our people, environment, asset, and also reputation. So is with current pandemic situation, is it a crisis? Or we need to activate the BCP, because BCP, we plan for the prolonged business disruption. But with current pandemic situation, So for Petronas Dagangan, we apply the minimum manning resources plan, which, for example, everyone talking about the MCO, the movement control order, which we are so lucky because Petronas under essential activities, so we can proceed. Our people can go to our plant, can go to our operation. So, but we need to control our numbers of people at the plant. So it's not the BCP activation yet. It's just at the minimum, we just control number of people because to avoid maybe the infection of the COVID-19. So, okay, yeah, this is come to me. I would like, what I try to anticipate from this training is, could you try to give the clear, like maybe the threshold, the demarcation, when is BCP activation? This is still under the crisis mode, is yet become the prolonged business disruption. So I know that because the current situation we are talking about everything is we need to deactivate the BCP. But what we try to practice is BCP is just only the minimal resource that we try to impose. But now with the current situation, everyone is working from home. Everyone business recovery is virtual office. So it's already the BCP, but everyone is working. It's not the minimal people is working. So I hope to get more clarification, or maybe you can share your best practices from other companies. So that's all.
Thank you very much. That's cool. Again, that sounds very very recognizable as well for those, because the whole thing about crisis management and BCP. I mean, I've had organizations, companies say we didn't actually even invoke the crisis management plan or the crisis management team or anything, because it was sort of semi business as usual. Not really, but sort of. You know, it wasn't like a big fire or flood or something where you really say this is a crisis. It was like this sort of slow moving vehicle, and suddenly everybody was starting to work from home and everything. There was no clear moment of now it's a crisis. So yeah, I've had many organizations not even taking it as serious as they should. They took it as semi business as usual, which really is not the case, of course. So very recognizable once again. It's going to be a really good course, I think, from hearing all your sharing. So thank you so far.
Okay.
All right. Okay, Iswan Suleiman, would you like to take the next step? Oh, sorry. Yes. Can you hear us?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Iswan from KWAP. Same like my colleague, Asnol.
Yeah.
So currently, I think we have the same situation in Malaysia, like I think most entire world of COVID-19. So my expectation on this, I think more on how to control the uncertainty of this pandemic, as well as I think the best practice in the world market. So I think most from that training, I think we have to gain more experience on what is the other different countries practice to combat the COVID-19.
Yeah. Right. Thank you for sharing.
Right.
Are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned international experience. Of course, you know, that's one of the things I've been doing also in Holland, to look at how the culture is in Europe about, you know, this whole COVID-19, and not just organizations, because organizations are of course a group of people, but more the general public, because they all participate also in work, of course. So if you know what the general public is doing, what they're talking about, and how they're behaving, you can also kind of predict or start thinking about, okay, what will that mean to the organizations that they work for? So yeah, I certainly will bring anything in that is of international nature and other countries. We can also share a little bit about, you know, what we learned last week with Brunei. I mean, the course that I ran last week. So yeah, I'll definitely share as much as I can from that angle as well. So thank you, Swan.
Right. All right.
Okay, Nur Shuyada. And I believe you have a colleague here as well from Petronas, correct? Wait, Nur, can you hear us? Can I?
Wait for a while.
That's better.
Hello?
Hi, how are you?
Yes, hello. My name is Nur Shuhada from Petronas Downstream Corporate Office. I'm currently doing risk management, but particularly in risk governance and assurance. Previously, I was in plant environment, serving as a reliability engineer in one of our facility in Terengganu. So, because when you are in plant, usually whatever that affects the plant usually being managed by the technical people, not sort of more on the business BCP side. If there's anything happen, for example, I have experienced a flood situation where people who work in the organization cannot have access to the office. So you have to take bus, sort of transportation is to be arranged. But doing so, yes, we would have some not a clear line between if this is a crisis or it is already a BCP, because sometimes a flight, the one that we experienced last almost for about 3 weeks. And then there was some issues on low feedstock or no feedstock, and how it impact our business and how our customers' expectation. And then also there's also some issues on the prolonged unavailability or the limitation of our physical asset, which is, for example, a heat exchanger or big pump that you have to wait until the next turnaround, which could take years, and how we want to manage our business up to until the availability, how we want to sustain our business and still providing to the customer, while also dealing with the limitation of the physical asset that impact the production. Those are the sort of the sort of a BCP kind of scenario that I have experienced before. And the real disaster that I have experienced, that, like I said, mostly flood, and if you are talking about near misses, it's more on the HSE side of it. But nowadays I'm just doing the any sort of governance and assurance part of BCM. Probably if there's a new governing document or anything, I need to be able to share with the OPUs under this downstream operation. And what I would want to expect from this workshop is that what are the things that needed in a robust BCP? I mean, what are the things that we need to consider in the BCP? For example, even in handling, I know that COVID-19 is very special situation, but however, I still believe that there things could be improved in, for example, our way of reacting to it, because there are some of the instructions or the what needs to be done is not being told in a very I mean, it's not, for example, using the technology, for example, using MS Team and so on, we kind of like a bit, previously it was in a shock manner, but, you know, you got to do what you got to do lah. So that's what I would expect. If you can share with us, what are the things that could make a good BCP, and how can people actually appreciate BCP, because sometimes a plan is just a plan if people are not really into it or really not believing this plan could work. Okay, so that's all for me.
Thank you very much for sharing. Yeah, we're going to actually talk about a BCP on a page in somewhere probably early tomorrow, I would say, early tomorrow morning. Because that's the other thing, the structure of BCPs tends to be overly, voluminous, and I'm going to share with you how you at least can create something that is a central document that everything else hangs off. You know, it's like an umbrella sort of approach that people can all understand and digest. So I'll definitely talk about the structure of documentation, etc., and what should be in the BCP and in what way. Thank you once again, Noor, and yeah, I look forward to sharing more with you over the course. And I wanted to ask, so Firdaus and Noor, are you guys colleagues directly?
Not exactly, but we kind of deal with each other. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. And Suravana, what a beautiful name. Would you like to share?
Hi, good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
I'm from FINBank. Actually, it's a BCM is one of a very new work for me. Where currently I'm from IT about 11 or 12 years. BCM is very new for me. Where I found that BCM is totally different kind of challenging that I have here actually, especially in terms of managing a stakeholder. Okay, because people that we are dealing normally at a high level, and the time slot and instruction from them is very, very high level. We need to basically manage at our levels and communicate or cascade to the relevant people exactly. And come to the, in terms of the, this is where I found another challenge where come to the crisis, to managing the crisis management. So the instructions where will be managing a BCM where it comes from different sources, either from to the customers or to the internal people, to the management, or to the crisis leader to go to the next level. All kind of the information communication will be managed by the BCM, where this is the challenge where I think is different field from where I gain from others. Okay, the second is where this COVID-19 pandemic situation, which is really help to improve in terms of the stakeholder roles and responsibilities, which I found that actually when before the crisis happened, we can see the role and responsibility from top to bottom, where it's really now unclear because all going under the testing mode. When it comes to the live mode, I can see most of the gap, then we fix immediately during the crisis. Secondly, where I found when the crisis happened, mostly it may impact both sides, actually operation and financial. But some other risks where I see increase during the like a pandemic crisis, also kind of cyber risk, fraud, and corruption. Also. Okay, that's all from me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you once again for sharing, Saravana, and everyone actually for
welcome
sharing. Thanks. Now, Melissa, I'm not sure. Have you got a microphone? And if not, please type something in the chat for us to share and to to see what your background is and your expectations as well. I'm not sure if you are able to see the chat and if you can actually if you can access that, or if you will have a microphone later in the program. That would be very useful, because we're doing a lot of interactive exercises as well. So hopefully, she's having an audio problem I hear. Okay, that's okay for now, and maybe we can hear a little bit more from Melissa later on. So once again, thanks for sharing. Now, the scope I was talking about earlier, so actually knowing what is included in all of this BCP type work. Some of you have just started in this field and you're maybe just dragged into a certain corner of BCP, like either COVID or IT DR, for example, like Savannah was sharing earlier, coming from an IT background. But what we're actually trying to do is put all those different scenarios under the BCP umbrella. And here you can see some examples of what scenarios we're talking about here, what sort of incidents. So I talked about IT and disaster recovery. You might also have a supplier that's out of action. So you guys are okay, your organization's fine, your staff are fine, your building is good, you've got people working okay, either from home or in the office, and your assets are fine, but one of your key suppliers may be down. And I'm sure one of you at least, would have experienced that, and feel free in the chat to keep on sharing. So if I say something and you think, oh yeah, we had this, or, please type away. It's all part of our intellect that we're sharing, all the different thoughts and experiences, and the chat and everything will be saved. And in fact, this whole session is purely for the participants. It's being recorded, so you can also check things back later on if you miss something or whatever, or if a few weeks from now, I don't know how long it will be there, but if you can actually, still access it and have a look at it. So please keep sharing. And supplier being out of action, you can imagine for Petronas, for example, who deals with so many different suppliers in their industry. If one key supplier is down, or multiple key suppliers are down, or a specific raw product or raw material, or some organization that helps with the actual process, and all the assets or the maintenance or spare parts or something, there's so many key suppliers in there. So yeah, you can imagine the impact of that. And your business might be fine, but your key supplier may be affected by some incident, and you're having to deal with that. Other things like phone system failure. Nobody seems to think about phones anymore. Everything is about IT and so on. But what I find is actually being able to tell customers about a disruption. Voice communication is actually quite powerful. Typing emails and systems being up and running is also important, but this voice is, you can actually still maintain the reputation of an organization quite well if you're able to communicate to customers. So that's also one of the incidents that could hit. You could be locked out due to a security incident. It's not always about evacuations. A lot of people who think about the building and security incidents or about fires and floods, that it's all about evacuating people. The evacuation or shelter in place, as we call it. So that could be also one thing that you need to look at and to see, hey, what is our strategy with that, and what would be the impact of that. We talked about flood, especially in Malaysia, and I've been to Malaysia probably 20 times, I think, and yeah, severe weather and flooding can quite easily happen for sure. So power outage is another thing, and that affects then straight away communication, whether it's mobile or landline type of communication or data communications. Being locked inside due to a safety issue, we touched on shelter in place. Fire, flu, we talked about cybercrime, etc. And denial of building access could be because of flooding or other reasons why, or there could be a chemical spill down the road which affects your access to your premises. And here are some examples from your region. So you can see here, diesel tanker catches fire along the highway, train derailments. There's things like bombings and anything to do with terrorism and attacks there. Flooding again. Foreigners being banned from entering. Now, this is a whole disruption in terms of not so much being locked out due to a security incident, but being locked out of the whole country, as we talked about earlier, being locked out of the whole country because of some sort of illness situation. And that impacts on some supply chain aspects as well. So where people normally would be able to travel or to bring goods and services in, and now they can't. So it's a supply chain disruption sometimes. Power failures we talked about, and here you can see that it was actually central Singapore caused by equipment failure substation. So actually really affecting the functionality of public transport, which then indirectly affects a whole heap of different organizations. And here you can see an example from Australia, where I'm normally based in Sydney. And you can see here from Western Australia, the public transport systems were offline because of a hacking attempt. So a cyber attack affecting the Internet of Things, as we would call it these days. So physical items could be lifts, could be water supply, could be, in this case, transport systems. It's quite stressful when you think about the impact that it can have on people's actual health and well-being. And it might be a cyber attack, but actually it can really affect the physical environment. And the same sort of thing was happening here in Europe when there was a cyber attack, the large-scale cyber attacks, around Pedia and Watercry, etc. There was quite a lot of things happening also with, in this case, transport systems. And a few examples here that you can see on hacking, and especially in the hospital IT systems. So my next slide here touches on why bother having a plan. I mean, some of you guys who work in telecoms or who work in, Petronas type environments, or, if you're so used to fixing things on the fly because there are so many disruptions in the sort of visible and physical sense regularly, you might face from your colleagues in the organization the idea that, well, We don't need a plan. Just call me at 3 o'clock in the morning. I will fix the problem. I'll come up with some solution. You know, I don't need to build a whole BCP. It's so much work, and you know. So, and once again, if you recognize this, please share in the chat, because I hear a lot of people globally being frustrated about this, where they try to do BCP and people just don't buy into, they don't have support for the whole concept of it. Well, maybe you recognize this little short slideshow. You can see here as an analogy, and I thought it was quite funny at the time. It's quite an old slideshow, and I thought I'll put it in here because of the humor behind it, but it has actually a serious message. So in this one, you can see a small white car ended up in the water. And hey, there's a BCP in place for that. We're going to get a crane. Whoops, well, that crane didn't quite work. And you might recognize this in COVID-19, for example, all the assumptions of, oh, we send people home to work, you know, sometimes these things don't work. And you can see another Band-Aid upon the Band-Aid. So now we've got the white car coming out. We need to pull the smaller crane out with another big crane. And there we go. Now, you might recognize this as BCP in your organization sometimes. You know, people just coming up with solutions, they're untested, they haven't been validated, we haven't walked through them. And yeah, and this is the last slide, is actually, it's Photoshop, okay? It's not real, but it's a very good lesson, and it's very humorous, I think, you know, to see what can happen. And I use this slideshow a lot also with senior management and say, look, what do you want to be? First of all, do you want to implement some of these untested solutions on the day of an incident? Do you want to really activate your plan like this? Or do you want to have something that's solid, that's pre-calculated, that is pre-assessed, that you can have some sort of certainty about? And the other question is, do you know if that white car actually warranted getting all these heavy investments, you know, on that day of the incident? Do you really need all those cranes to turn up on the day? Is that really a good investment? Or could that car stayed in the water maybe for 4 or 5, 6 extra hours, where you could have come up with a more efficient solution? So these are the sort of messages you want to bring to the table when you're talking to more senior people. You know, it's about efficiency, it's about calculating certain impacts before an incident, and then comparing that to the cost of implementing a solution. You know, and if it's cost in terms of financial or reputational or operational sort of damage, you know, if you don't fix that incident, all those things have to be weighed up against the investment into that solution. So yeah, it's quite usually quite sizable. So the next slide is all about the benefits of BCP, even if a disaster never actually happens. Very, very, very important slide. I heard quite a lot of you guys say, you know, I need buy-in, I need to sell the whole concept of BCP so I can get budget. I need to actually get people to understand how important this thing is. Now, if that's a challenge that you've got, because people now think, on the one hand, people are more aware because of COVID, you know, that, oh, business continuity, that's a really important thing. But on the other hand, they've become a little bit complacent because for 6 months or so, they're now working from home and they're thinking, this is it. You know, they don't have to think beyond this particular scenario. They all have one point of reference, which is COVID-19, which is, of course, not all the things that could happen. So if you are actually facing the same challenge, I suggest don't just use the stick. You know, you can see in gray there on the right-hand side of the slide. Don't just use the stick by saying, we must have it for compliance, or, you know, it's a regulator is telling us. Actually try to find really the carrot, you know, what makes people tick at different levels of the organization. Now, first of all, you might find their stakeholder and client confidence. So if some of your clients need more confidence in your business because you need to be more prepared for certain disasters, this BCP can actually help sell, you know, projects to clients. It may be able to sell a more positive message to clients about the fact that you as a business have thought about all these things that could go wrong and how it could impact on those clients and what you have done to prevent those impacts. So a lot of people now, a lot of businesses are putting this kind of thing on their website now. They're using it in tender responses, you know, responding to tender, requests for tender, to say, hey, we are here for the long run. You know, we have a plan in place. You should choose us as your supplier. So it can really be quite a powerful thing. And you don't need a disaster to get that benefit. I hope I'm making sense here, you know. Now, we talked about compliance, of course. Now, corporate social responsibility is important as well, because staff are also quite savvy, you know, when it comes to these things. And they want to be informed when an incident happens. Their health and well-being is their front and foremost the most important thing to them. So if you provide them with proper information during an actual incident, and their role is clear, and they know if they should go home, or do they go back to the office, or do they even know if their salary will be paid on the day of an incident? These are the sort of things that are in the realm of corporate social responsibility. So absolutely use that as a selling point for BCP, and to really inform the staff of the fact that this is important for themselves. And if they don't participate and they don't, don't leave their details with you to be able to put on a list somewhere and all that sort of thing, and if they don't know their role, it's actually going to get them more confused in an actual incident. So having, and the other thing is you're not going to contact them in the same quick way as with other staff who are, you know, more willing to share their information, etc., and who will get the information, for example, to go home and stay put or get some rest. You know, if people don't want to participate in the process, it's also going to really damage their own health and well-being. That's the important message there. Better investment decisions. Now, that's an interesting angle. That is, if you calculate business continuity impacts really well, and you actually look at the different strategies properly, and you do business impact analysis, you're actually going to be more efficiently investing in certain controls and treatment options, and not just knee-jerking into those investments. And you know, maybe Suravana would recognize this. If you've worked in IT before, it's very tempting to implement solutions like real-time replication and load balance data centers and hot failover sites, you know, high availability, active systems. But there are also enormous costs to those. And if you are more informed and you know better what we should, you know, invest in and what the business can actually handle as delays in that IT recovery, you can actually make more sensible investment decisions. Now, the next bullet point is better day-to-day business. And that is, if you have a plan for the big bang or for the big disasters, you're also going to be potentially using parts of that plan for the smaller day-to-day hiccups, you know, the mini disasters that happen on a weekly or daily or monthly basis when you, for example, roll out a new product or, you know, have some staff changes. So if you've got that BCP, it helps you with the bigger end-to-end kind of disasters, and therefore, if you partially invoke it, it actually helps you with the smaller ones. Now, some of you work in insurance out there, and you probably know the word business interruption insurance. You probably know that term. Now, really, organizations should think about the benefits in that regard if they have a better disaster recovery or business continuity or risk management framework. They can actually talk to their insurer and potentially get either a better insurance deal or cheaper insurance, you know, cheaper premiums, lower premiums. Because other organizations that don't have a plan, they should probably be seen as a more risky investment for an insurance company. Yeah, because they will activate well, they won't activate their BCP, they'll actually put in claims instead and have downtime of their business. So if you actually have quite a good sense of your capability, your continuity capability, you should really share that with your insurance company and try to get some discounts or better coverage. If that doesn't sink in with senior management, I don't know what does, because that is a daily, monthly, annual expense for them. And you don't need a disaster to actually benefit from that particular thing. You have to benefit from those lower premiums, because, yeah, as you can see, it's a daily benefit for people, even if there's never an actual incident. And of course, the last one is general peace of mind, especially senior leaders. You know, they don't like feeling responsible for things going wrong, and they don't like having no control of a situation. So general peace of mind for having that control and having that potentially more sort of a more relaxed feeling about what might happen is actually resonating usually quite well with senior people. So hopefully that gives you some ideas. If you're struggling with how to sell BCP out there in the organization, these are some of the immediate benefits of having a plan, even if a disaster never actually strikes. Now this is another interesting picture, and I'm going to put the chat out here to see if anyone wants to share. Please go for it if you have any ideas for others also to consider. But what I wanted to say is this picture about running from the bear, and this is probably the first invitation for you guys all to dump something in the chat quickly. I'm going to dish out virtual chocolate over the course, and this is the moment of the virtual chocolate for the quickest answer. That is also something that is not perfect maybe, but a pretty good answer I'd like to see from every one of you, if possible. So the picture of running from the bear, my question is, if we're all running from the bear, how fast do you need to be? So I'll leave that with you for a moment. Please type in the chat. And as I just did, you can share, actually you see the buttons up the top if you're not so familiar with WebEx. You can look at the top and float your mouse over there and see chat. And in there you can type away. And you can share normally with all the other participants. If there's any issue with that or something, let me know, because I can actually fix that usually with some settings. And I believe Marianne is also very comfortable now with that. So run for your life for now. Thank you very much for sharing that one. I'd like to hear some other thoughts. How fast do you need to be? Yeah, faster than anyone there. Fast as possible? Yes, but I do like this answer that I'm hearing here from Iswani. Faster than anyone there. Interesting, no? And look, the thing is, and please keep typing away if you like, the thing is, if you want to be faster than the bear, as fast as possible, you may not have the right level of investment for that. Like you may not have budget for beating any disaster out there, in this case, the bear. But what you might have enough for is for being faster than all your other competitors or other people in KL or other people in, I think one of you guys is in Penang, you might be the fastest company that actually survived a flood in Penang or something. And what used to be the case is that was good enough. If you had a story like that hitting the news that you were actually doing better than others in your industry or in your region, it was actually seen as you're pretty good. But one problem is now here, and that is customers are starting to get more and more smart about what you could be doing to actually prepare for disasters and what manual workarounds you might have and what dual supplier options you might have. And so 10, 15 years ago, this used to be quite an easy answer, like, oh, I did better than everybody else. That's good enough. My customers are still pretty loyal. But what you need to think about now is customers still see it as a big reputational damage and a loss of face if you didn't actually think about some of these incidents and the impacts and how to actually prepare. So I would say this doesn't really fly anymore. It only really flies when you have a major impact of one disaster that hits a complete area, and yeah, people could be empathetic with that. But if something here happens just to your industry or just your geographical area, your street, your city, yeah, and if people haven't even seen that in the news, I think you're kidding yourself if you think you can hide behind this this strategy of, oh, well, I'll do it better than everybody else, and that will be. So yeah, that's the idea here. Now, this is also an interesting angle here. If something were to happen, you want to be actually looking for the silver lining, if you know what I mean. The silver lining meaning, what's the benefit in here? And Mars bars, the chocolate, they had a massive product recall a number of years ago. And oh, it was enormous, actually large scale. So they had to come up quickly with a way to keep those customers buying chocolate from them. And what they did is they made a full media campaign around how can we actually show that the product that was damaged, where the plastic was found, because they had found a piece of plastic in one of the Mars bars, what they actually worked out is with a sort of a media campaign, an advertising campaign, a very sort of humorous video, they showed the dumping of the old Mars bars with a big truck, and then there was the big truck, actually the other trucks, carrying new fresh Mars bars that didn't have that problem, that were tested properly. They sent them back to the stores, and that was all showed in that video. And the perception of the public was, wow, it's now really safe to buy Mars bars. So because they really visually showed the dumping of the old one and the new ones were getting on the shelf, etc. So they actually reported 10 to 15% more sales than the previous year in that same month. And what you find there is customers could be quite loyal if you do the right thing under pressure. They are actually appreciative of the fact that you come up with something. So that was the experience of Mars. Now, another one is an interesting one, that is the nudie juice. That is a particular sort of a fashion juice, all those healthy juices that we can now buy. This is a healthy juice, and this was an example from Australia, actually. And what we find there is there was a small fire on site in that factory of the juice, and the big boss, he was asking for answers, how did this happen, who caused this? And none of the staff actually could put their finger on it, but people said, oh, it was an electrical failure, therefore it was a fire, and we put it out, and don't worry about it, it's gone now, and we all survived it, and nothing was damaged. But the big boss thought, oh my goodness, I need to have plans in place for this, if something were to happen to the factory. So he made a reciprocal arrangement, a mutual aid agreement, as we would call them sometimes, with another juice manufacturer who was on the sort of the wholesale side of it, so not direct competitor, but had the same equipment, which is often the problem, right? If you're looking for help, you often end up knocking on the door of a competitor because they have the same equipment needs and the same sort of provisions that you could use. So with this particular juice, within actually, when a real fire actually happened, within about 6 months, they activated that plan. They went to the juice manufacturer, the wholesale manufacturer, they actually started producing not all of the juice, but actually the top 3 types. They also had stored bottles and labels and things like that at this other location, so they could get started straight away producing new juice. And within a couple of days, they had that new juice that was produced from the other factory. They had it back on the shelves. And little did they know that the media was going to be all over this, because the media heard about this and they were like, wow, this little company, look at what they're doing. Those little soldiers out there, they're actually producing this, the new, type of the new juice, the existing juice in that other factory, and it's back on the shelves. Unbelievable. Within 3 days, they're back almost sort of, in a skinny way, back to sort of business as usual. What a fantastic effort. So because of all of that, they got so much publicity. All the papers were full, and the staff are still saying it's the best thing that ever happened to us, because we got all this free marketing, the brand. We didn't even have budget for any of this marketing, and because of that incident, we got all this free publicity. So yeah, they're very, very, at the time, nervous, of course, but now they look back and they think, wow, that was the silver lining. And at the time, they even went as far as selecting a day, maybe a week later, when everything was almost back to normal in that production. They were like, wow, maybe we can just give free juice to all the firemen in our state or our city. And it had nothing to do really with the incident. I mean, there was only one fireman that put it out, but they were giving juice to all the firemen in that particular city. And sure enough, the media was all over it. What a great stunt, and etc. So yeah, you can see the benefit there in seeing the silver lining and really reaping the benefits. Similarly, and this is a bit of a cheeky cup, of course, with that acronym there, and I'm sure you all thought, oh my goodness, it says a whole different word there. Now, that's of course the case. And what happened there is that KFC, they didn't have chicken one day. They ran out because they had a new arrangement with a courier company, and they ended up with no chicken in a whole heap of stores. And of course, that is like, well, for a chicken shop, that is not a good thing. So you know, they put out a whole media campaign. They put these funny cups out there. They put everywhere, you know, what happened. They actually communicated super well in all the different papers. And therefore, people had a laugh about it. And yeah, when it was back, you know, in the stores, they went back there. So the restaurants actually, yeah, overall didn't have that much sales damage, except for the actual hours that they did run out of chicken. But people compensated later for that, you know, very quickly. A similar event actually happened with COVID-19 in New Zealand, where people, when the lockdown was over, they ran to KFC, McDonald's, and all this, and they bought all these hamburgers like maniacs because they didn't have any hamburgers for a long time or no fried chicken. And yeah, the first day, all these stores ran out, all these restaurants. So you have a mini disaster because of actually something really positive, and that can happen as well. The next bottle you might recognize as alcohol. It looks like an alcohol bottle, in fact, a gin bottle, I believe. I'm no expert on that type of alcohol, but I heard that it looks like a gin bottle. And what happened there was there were factories that were actually just starting out. Like there's a couple of examples in Australia. There's also some examples in America, and I think in Asia must be a few as well, where basically these factories who were supposed to start making gin, in this case, they, during COVID-19, in the beginning of it, they understood, oh my goodness, there's a massive shortage on hand sanitizers, on anything to do with alcohol, you know, and that we can rub our hands with. And they thought, okay, let's not even think about making gin. Let's start making hand sanitizers, you know, because we've got similar equipment to make that. And, you know, we can actually, you know, put it in maybe slightly different bottles, but we can actually make that work. And they're doing great business now. And I believe none of them I've heard actually wanting to switch too soon to the actual drinks that they're supposed to produce. And now the situation is, of course, now they're making profits out of hand sanitizer, and they didn't expect that as well. So that's another example of silver lining. And pardon me. And the last example there, I don't know if any of you read Mandarin. Please share in the chat what you think it means. But as far as I understand, it means the word crisis, and it has two symbols in the one, which is danger and opportunity. And I'd like to hear if that's correct, but that's what I've heard, you know, what this means. So basically, in the Chinese philosophy, I should probably say, you know, they're actually looking at the flip side of an incident straight away. And a crisis is not necessarily a bad thing, you know. So, oh my goodness, I'm just reading some of your chats here in the field. Yeah. So yeah, so that's an example there. And please keep chatting away, because I can see you guys are sharing some thoughts on mutual aid agreements and things like that. And that's what the situation was with that juice manufacturer. And I do agree, you know, it's a good recovery plan. However, both entities could be in the same disaster area. And that's the thing. It doesn't help you with every single thinkable scenario. But if it's a power failure in your zone of the city, for example, and you had a agreement with another organization in another part of the city, see, those things could work, you know. And it's all about having plan B, C, and D. You know, maybe this plan doesn't work for everything, but there's another plan that we have in case that particular thing happens. So yeah, very good comments, and yeah, it's great to hear you guys share those thoughts in here. The good part with the mutual aid agreement is that it's usually cheap or free. Yeah, and I've seen many people building disaster recovery sites, as in work area recovery sites somewhere else. They spend a lot of money on it, or they subscribe to a commercial service that does that, and it's costly. You know? And if you never use it, it's like, oh my goodness, this is wasting a lot of money. So that's where these mutual aid agreements come in very easily sometimes and very comfortably. I know one organization that actually has an arrangement with their own customers who have a real interest in this organization continuing, because they're servicing that customer if they continue on. And that customer actually said, you can come here and continue at least your meeting. There's spare meeting rooms here, use Wi-Fi, grab a coffee and whatever, but continue working. Because, and this is for a corporate law firm actually, who actually, they need to keep working, because this customer actually needs their help, especially during incidents. So, you know, because of legal advice advice and things like that. So they made a whole different type of arrangement once again. So you can think about those types of solutions as well for your sector, perhaps. So the program for this workshop, we started on our introductions, virtual meet and greet, really, background, history, a few standards that we ran through, and we'll do a few more in a minute. And then we'll have an interactive icebreaker exercise. So you guys may have all received a link with Mural. It's a digital sticky notes exercise. I love sticky notes. I have spent a lot of money on sticky notes, and I have about 37 colors in my house, I think. I calculated the other day, slightly different. And this tool that we're going to use for that interactive session is really, a digital sticky note tool. And some of you have been in there. I saw quite a few interactions in there, so that will be hopefully very comfortable. If you couldn't open that link because your environment where you work doesn't allow it in terms of security, we will put up the central item on the screen, so where all the people are working and the others in the group, and we will have the chat open for those who actually don't have the ability to put sticky notes on there, the digital sticky notes. But we'll get there in a minute, so or in about half an hour. So what we'll do as well is then have a couple of steps of my best practice framework for business continuity. In fact, step 1 and step 2, which is all about the business continuity objectives, how to actually set the right objectives, and then also risk management, which some of you have highlighted as an important part. So we will look at those aspects today. In fact, this morning we will cover those with some exercises related to those. And then in this afternoon, we will be starting to look at BCP teams. So actually looking at how to craft a group of people who could be decision makers, and how to craft another group of people who could be looking at the actual damage assessment, for example, of a real incident. And there's a whole heap of other teams that we normally use. Depends a little bit how big your organization is, but we'll run through some best practices for you. And then at the end of the afternoon, if we have time, sometimes we don't, but we'll see how we go, it would be about time-critical business processes. Yeah, and about how to actually start getting selective on what you need to keep continuing to work on during an actual incident, on which things you can actually stop. So we'll look at that in step 4 of the framework. Another part there is step 5, the BIA. And like I said, step 4 and 5, they are a little bit flexible as to do we do them today or tomorrow morning, because the first 3 steps are quite intensive. But yeah, maybe we get to a certain point there. What we have with business impact analysis is also some interactive sessions and subgroups to get an idea of how to structure all of that, and also get some buy-in for BCP from senior people. So that's the BIA, as you would call them in some organizations, and that would be the scope for today. Tomorrow, we're going to continue then on step 6, which will be continuity provisions and strategies and workarounds, etc., to meet the expectations that we calculated in the first 5 steps, yeah, to really make it realistic. And then activating the BCP. So what do you need in terms of checklists, in terms of quick reference cards, etc. And we're also going to look at crisis management team meetings, what you actually put on the agenda for them. That's a practical group discussion. I find that it's very confusing for most people, and not a huge list of black text on white paper. We're talking about actually really practical tools like a checklist or bullet points, to say what are we going to put on the agenda for these senior leaders. And a handout related to that. Then we're going to continue on with testing, exercises, training and awareness, which brings everything together. Yeah, and sometimes we find that because of the interactive exercise related to that, we actually delve into all that work also through the afternoon. It's a little bit flexible as to whether we get to the final parts in detail or more in a generic sort of level, which includes around sort of mid-afternoon the BCP maintenance and continuous improvement, and then some practical exercises. We could talk a little bit more about COVID. We could talk a little bit more about benchmarking the BCP and about social media and selecting a recovery site provider. Now, all of these things work really well in subgroups, and we call them breakout sessions. In WebEx, we will be able to group you guys in subgroups. Sometimes I will do that by industry. So, for example, we've got a couple of banks in there and insurance companies, etc. We could do it that way, but also sometimes we group people more on a sort of a random level and really staying away from working with colleagues, if that makes sense. So we also try to separate all the colleagues and so that they learn more from other people in the course. And then at the final bit there is actually to talk about the way forward after this course. A couple of notes on copyright. The materials of this workshop contain intellectual property, and it's normally provided as a commercial product. But we have decided for Zenit delegates that you are able to use the templates that I'm handing out during this course for your own business. So in your organization, to improve your BCP, you can use those. You can't do consultancy with them, if that makes sense. Yeah, I don't want you to go out there and use my materials and make money out of those, if you don't mind. If you do have those ideas, please talk to me, and I'm sure we can work out something. But that's the kind of the limit there. And also in terms of the actual course, the materials in digital form, all the slides, I'm unable to share. There's some copyright materials in there, but also the volume is so big that it's not best practice that we do that. But all the recordings of these courses you have available to you. So you see the slides and me, etc. So all of them is being recorded. And I guarantee once you've got the handouts that I talked about earlier, you will actually be able to really start crafting your own plan. And we're definitely, in the next 2 days, we'll get really hands-on with all of that. So most people will be quite helped by that level. And hopefully you respect that copyright clause there. So first, and Krista was saying, I wouldn't dream of using your work for consulting. Well, you never know, you might be a consultant one day. And maybe we could work together on it. That would be far more fun, of course. So the next slide is all about some real nuisances that you might recognize if you're doing this work. The first one is, when there's testing suggested, people are too busy with high priority production issues or something like that. They're always like, oh, testing, let's do it next week, next month, next year. It's like pushing it forward, unfortunately. And that comes back to commitment and so on. But also sometimes the BCP manager or DR manager doesn't actually think what would be best time of the week for these people. I've seen people trying to organize tests on a Saturday morning where really that's the time when all the staff are with their kids and they're doing other things. And, so yeah, sometimes it's hard to do testing during working hours because it might disrupt your day-to-day business. I would suggest progressively grow in that field. Start with something simple. Even the simplest tests, with the smallest scope, I've always learned something with people that I did that with. So it's all about, making it feel realistic, using bells and whistles during those tests and making people get the experience, even though it might not be a full-blown, production type test. The next bullet point is all about numerous emails being sent to a particular department or team in your business, and they're not giving it any attention. People get 500 whatever emails a week, and my experience is that your topic, business continuity, is not going to end up the top unless they are the BCP manager themselves who are really passionate about it. But there's not that many people that are passionate about it. Full stop. They're busy with other things that are actually making money for the business, or introducing new marketing concepts, or dealing with customers. And some of them feel this is a little extra. So once again, a reason for making things really simple and easy to follow. The next bullet point is all about emergency procedures being published on your intranet, but if something were to happen, many staff still don't know what to do, where to go. If they came back from lunch, for example, and the building was red taped off, with that red and white tape, and if the systems were shut down because of a cyber attack, you still need to keep that training and awareness of all the staff, and not just once when they join the organization, but actually ongoingly. I would say absolute minimum of every 6 months. But ideally, you also add another 3 monthly sort of moment where you either do a partial test, or you do some walkthrough or a mini scenario test. And well, then the last bullet point there, one particular business unit not turning up at your annual BCP test. Yeah, that's a similar thing as the first two bullet points, you know, like the lack of attention. And my experience is actually those are the people who say they're really critical, but they think they're too good and too important to actually turn up on a, you know, out of hour sort of timing to do that testing. So I don't know if you recognize some of these things there. Yeah, it's also, I'm seeing a couple of you already sharing things here. I mean, yeah, the issues BCP doesn't always get into the minds of some. Yeah. Yeah, and also not, even if it gets in their mind, it doesn't get on the top priority list of the list, you know. It's more like, oh, we can do that some other time. And the last one there, very similar, but now at the executive level, when you're actually trying to optimize an off-site remote facility or recovery site, yeah, you might find that the executives wonder why to invest money in a dead site. You know, it's sitting there idle, potentially fading away, or using money that is never actually used. And so, yeah, it can be very frustrating. And there are ways around it, though. Like you could use that facility, for example, as a training room, and even commercially as a training room. And only if there's a disaster, there's a clause in your contract with clients that, you know, they can be kicked out and you can use it for your own purposes. That kind of thing. And maybe you don't earn a huge amount because those clauses reduce potentially the value of that product, but you could actually think about, hey, this would be at least some sort of income stream, and it will really resonate with senior people that they see, okay, we're actually smart about this, you know, we're using it. And those clauses that I mentioned are quite important there because, yeah, otherwise they see the site being used by others and they think, oh my goodness, what if we have an incident? You know, we need to be able to use that site. So just work it out contractually and practically with those external parties. Now, what is BCP? Always get this question. It's the capability of an organization to continue delivery of products and services within acceptable timeframes at predefined capacity during disruption. Now, predefined capacity and also within predefined timeframes where you actually come back with it, with at least a part of that service or to a certain level. And this definition is actually from the ISO 22301 standard. So the key concepts there are maintaining services to customers, remaining operational, etc. Now the next thing is business continuity planning, and that's documented information, the BCP. It guides an organization to respond to a disruption and resume, recover, and restore the delivery of products and services consistent with its business continuity objectives. Yeah, sorry, let me just go up and make that chat a little bit less wide. So what you see there is it's the documented version of it. So it's not the same as the end-to-end business process that you see up there. Business continuity as a process up the top is more a second nature habit or process in an organization. Whereas the BCP is a tangible document to say step by step what can we do. And then we've got BCM, which we also sometimes call something called like resilience management. Now, generally, that's used as a term that encompasses BCP and DR procedures, as well as broader aspects like risk assessment and control, impact analysis, crisis management, all those other things you guys mentioned, basically. So that is more BCM. That's resilience management or BCM. And IT service continuity management is then the ITIL term, and that actually is related to the IT services and continuing those to a predetermined and agreed level. But it's not covering things like desks and phones and seats usually. Sometimes phones, yeah, but it depends on who manages those. But IT service continuity is more really about those IT services. So it doesn't look at spare staff. It doesn't look at key non-IT suppliers. It doesn't look at delivery of products and so on. It really looks at the IT services. I hope that's all clear. Now, if not, this may help. This is a picture that shows how it all kind of hangs together, as I normally would call it. And one of you guys talked about crisis management planning and IT disaster recovery and business continuity. Now, this is how you could view that whole interaction. BCM being the big one there, which is all of those processes included, including risk management and assessment, staff awareness, BIA, all of that. Now, BCP then is the documented version or the structured plan, and a subset of that is usually IT, disaster recovery planning. Other subsets of that would be your crisis management plan, your emergency management plan, and sometimes other things that are more specific, like departmental plans for IC, for business continuity. So there's a lot of sub-elements to that whole BCP and BCM scope. So that may be helpful for you to visualize that and to see, these are actually parallel documents, but they're in the same context as BCP, and they are actually they should speak the same language, and it shouldn't take more time or effort to go through those documents in isolation. We should actually look at them in a modular sort of way, where quite a few of those elements from all of these plans are generic. They are actually applicable to all of them, and like things like version control and all those key elements, key risks, etc., which we talk about a lot in these kind of documents. What you would want in there is anything that's not specific to these processes like IT, DR, and CMP and EMP. You want them to be listed one level up and actually seen as a generic kind of content. All right. Then a quote, and I'd like you to please look at this quote and tell me who said this. And please type in the chat what you think. It's an old quote. Type in the chat who you think was the real person who this quote. So please share in there the first virtual chocolate winner. I'd like to award. So who might have said this? And this is in 1907, so there's another hint. If you don't know who might have said this. Must be a difficult one. And one is in really 1907? Absolutely. Any thoughts on who might have said this? In 1907, and I'll give you a hint. Something changed in his perception in 1912. 5 years after he said this, he was in a little bit of a shock. And I'll give you another hint. The shock was caused by an iceberg. So who do you think? Yes! The virtual chocolate goes to Harry, the Titanic. Absolutely. So Captain Edward Smith in 1907 said this. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is there are senior management people out there who, even though things have happened, things have hit them or their neighbors or other people, they still have the perception that tomorrow I'm turning up at work and things will be normal, And with COVID, of course, nothing's normal anymore, but there's still quite a lot of executives out there who haven't even thought about floods and fires, etc. They just go, we want to go back to normal. So if you have not seen an incident for 40 years, do you think really tomorrow it might happen? Usually people are quite complacent and they don't expect that to happen at all. So if that's the situation, I tend to use this slide, also senior management type teams, and just to say, where are you in this perception? is this also how you think? You know, or where should we take it too serious and where should we take it fairly lightly, this whole risk management and BCM space? So some mistakes and misconceptions. Let me just quickly check the time, and we'll start on this one and then we'll hold on for a moment, maybe one or two more slides. So mistakes and misconceptions. If it hits the fan, our external suppliers will rapidly deliver everything we need because we put it in a contract. This is something I hear almost on a daily or weekly basis. Oh, we've got it covered. That is the term. And my question is two things. One is, have you tested that? What is